Okay.
Which version of the Spring you're using? You mentioned 5.2, right?
Yeah, 5.
Okay. So is this a Spring Boot project you have recently worked on?
Yes. This is a Spring Boot project.
Okay. So suppose if you have to set up a Spring Boot project from scratch, right? So how would you do that?
Okay. For that, we need to create the Spring Boot project. So you can use the Spring Boot initializer, and you can add all the dependencies Spring Boot initializer provide the Spring Boot. Suppose you are using the REST APIs, then you have to add the web dependencies, and also if you are using the Spring Data GPA, then you can use that dependency, and you can download the structure of the project, and you can import as a Maven project in your STS in IDE. And after that, you can use either you can use the embedded Tomcat, or if you want to use the external, then so you can set up the external Tomcat as well. So if you want to use the embedded Tomcat, you can use there is the dependency you have to add, and for that in the main class you have to mention the annotation like at the Spring Boot application, and you can write to your controller class, and you can create your application.
Okay. So suppose I have a controller. Okay. So I have written a controller, and so I have set up my project, and I have write down the controller.
Okay.
So if I up my application, can I hit that controller, or anything else I need to be configured?
In the main class, you have to mention the it is a Spring Boot application dot run, and you have to mention the main class also. So that's the main thing you have to mention into the main class.
Okay, so that's why I'm telling. I have set up the project. Okay, I have added on the dependencies. I have just defined the Spring Boot, the main class itself, right? I have loaded the context. I have the controller. Okay, so everything is fine. I have my application. I will try to hit the application. Okay, whatever endpoints I have written, will that work, or I need to configure something else?
No, in the controller
So
you have to, in the controller you have to mention the method, and we are mapping the request. So at the rate, you have to mention the at the request mapping, which method you are whether it is get or post method. And suppose you are producing JSON or consuming JSON, you have to mention the method data annotation for that method, and after that you can easily.
So controller is fine. I have written everything.
Okay.
Everything is fine from the dependency. Okay. So do you think between the controller and the main thing, something sits into between?
Yeah, in the application.properties file you have to mention the, but there is no need because default port is there. So if you want to change, you can change it, but I don't think so. You need to require the change into the port when you start the application.
Okay, so so in your current project, right, you have used Spring Boot with the REST services, right?
Yeah.
So what security you have implemented for that?
Security. Yeah, we are using the OAuth and 2-way SSL.
Auth and SSS. So now I'm coming back to my question. What else you have to configure in between? Have you ever tried it? If you just only write down the controller, will that work?
Yeah, it will work. There is no need to. Means you can use the hello world, and you can easily, if you are using, if you are expecting the.
Have you heard about the web security configure adapter, something like that?
Yeah, Spring Security. Yeah.
Have you heard about?
Yeah, I have heard.
Yeah, so that's why I want to ask, what is in the between?
Okay. Yeah.
So if you try
Mhm.
that, it won't work directly.
Okay.
So how you have implemented in your project?
Yeah. So in our project, we have used the OAuth, and we are
Mm-hmm.
using the we are configured the uh, OAuth in our in the application properties file. We are giving the client ID, secret ID, and the authorization URL.
Mm-hmm.
So client ID and secret ID gets authenticated in the authorization server, and authorization server send the access token to the application. So that access token get validated in the resource server, and then request get forward to the API.
Okay. And where do you mention all those things?
In the application.properties file, you have to mention the all
Yeah,
the
properties you have mentioned, right?
yeah.
What kind of class I have to implement in between, which takes care of all those things?
Yeah, there is a security class you have to mention. So
Hmm?
you have to extend the web security adapter, and you have to override the configure method, and you have to authenticate
Yeah,
the
that's what I
user. Yeah,
wanted to
okay.
listen.
Authenticate the user. Suppose you have the role like
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, so it directly it doesn't work.
yes,
Even if you don't want to implement, then still you have to implement the configure method, and you
yes,
have to just allow the method.
yes, correct.
Sorry, allow the request, and whatever security we implement into the configure method.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and on the controller side,
Hmm.
okay, uh, uh, were you using any database?
Yeah, we are using the Oracle.
Any database involved into the okay, so from controller, sorry, and the controller, how was your architect? Like, so you have got the request into the controller. Then what would next happen?
Yeah.
As
So
soon as you receive, okay, you have got into the method. Yeah, after that, I just want to listen what you were doing with the request.
yeah. So in our case, when the request come into the controller, then we are passing that request to the service layer, and service layer
Hmm.
there are the transactions, and we are passing that redacting request to the DTO layer, and in the DTO layer we have written the queries. So yeah, we are
Hmm.
using the Hibernate. So we are fetching it from the database data, and we are returning that to the that object to the controller. So that JSON we are finally return to the end user.
Okay. And what response you are returning to the end user?
JSON.
JSON.
Yeah.
So suppose if okay, so if I have a get entity call, okay, and whatever entity IDs I'm passing is not available, in that case, what response you will return?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So for that we are return the custom exception classes, and
Hmm.
suppose if there is any exception occurs, then we have returned the that exceptions using the throw keyword.
Okay. So ideally, if entity is not found, then what type of code you should return?
Entity is not found.
Suppose if I have a get ID, okay, get employee ID, okay, so I have as get employee or says employee slash employee ID. If that employee is present, then you will definitely return 200. So if employee is not present,
Okay.
that what HTTP status you will return?
Okay. So for that, we are using the response entity classes. Suppose we here in current project
Mm-hmm.
we are using the REST template to invoke the services, and once we get the response from the that service, then we will store that response into response entity, and response entity uh, you can use the exact status code, so it will provide you the status code that means that end service return. You can use that status code, and you can throw it into the using your custom exception class. You can throw that exception. So we are just
Okay, yeah, I was interested in knowing what code you will return. Suppose as an end consumer, I should be knowing what kind of code can hit. 200, okay, it means my request is okay, right?
yeah.
So if it is not present, then what code you will return?
Yeah. When if it is not returned, then we use the try catch. In the catch block, we have returned throw new, and we have we have returned the custom classes, exception custom classes. So we have returned that into the custom exception classes.
Yeah. So even in the custom classes, okay.
Okay.
So you will still be returning 200 in that case?
No, we are not returning 200. We are returning whatever we are getting from the end services.
But that we have to catch in. So I'm suppose if I'm looking for some ID, employee by ID. Okay. If that employee ID is present, then definitely I will fetch from the database and I will
Yep.
return. Okay.
Okay.
Suppose if that I pass the wrong employee ID. Okay. It is not present. Then what would you return?
Means that is something is written like that is the 200 response in that case also. Yeah. Means
Okay. In which scenario you should see like 404? Yeah, 404. In which scenario you will return the 404?
404 means your requested URL is not found. In that scenario, you will getting that 404, 404.
Okay, so if my URL is like something host name, okay, and then slash services slash, so my URL like consists if my URL is a get call, so what I will do slash event slash employee slash ID. So this is my URL.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so if I pass the right URL, right employee ID, then I will get the response. If my employee ID is wrong,
Okay.
then how do you see it if the employee ID is not present?
So along with exception, do you set any other HTTP status request, or it's just 200 only? How you do in your project when something goes wrong?
Yeah.
What status you return there? Yeah.
Yeah. So in our case, when we are passing the SSN here, and once we are not getting the data, then the service that throwing the 204. So we are passing that message that the data is not available. This is the custom message that we are sending to the in the JSON, and that JSON we are sending to the end user like one trust. So 204 means no data is not present.
Okay.
Then yeah. And okay, you are using O2, right? Have you heard about it? The secured notation.
Secure notation.
If it is a SSLOS, right?
Okay.
So there are two parts. One is authentication and another one is authorization.
Yeah.
So how you have implemented the authorization? Authentication, I can understand you have used OAuth2, right?
Yeah.
So if the token is validated, then you will get the access to the particular controller. But how you are maintaining the authorization? Okay, not everyone will have access to everything, right? Based on the role, someone can access some APIs and some other person can use the other API.
Yeah.
So how you will implement the authorization?
Authorization, we use the single sign-on for that, and we have added that particular user into the AD group, and we have provided the access.
AD group.
Yeah.
Do you use the LDAP for that or something else?
I forgot the name, but yeah, we have there is a separate team that will manage. We have provided the list of the users, and we have just configured that. Uh, yeah, the list of user we have added into the AD group, and that AD group will means that single sign-on is there, so it will get authenticated.
On the API level, okay, on the API level, okay, if I talk about the controller, I have the controller, I have write down the API, okay, I have the get mapping, response body, everything written.
Okay.
If on that plus I want to implement the authorization, how would I implement?
Yeah, in the API level, then you can use the Spring Security, and when the request comes, then you can validate that user through your the database. If you are storing the data into a database, you can validate that user.
Okay, if I don't want to go on the database, because database will only comes into picture when I go inside the controller. Okay, if before the controller. Okay, so even it should be checked on the before entering into the controller.
Okay.
Whether I am authorized to use this particular API or not.
Okay. Authorization. So we
Okay.
need to use the Spring AOP, and we can redirect this to the. We can use the filter interceptor for that. And you can validate that user.
Okay. Okay. So which version of Java you have used?
1.8.
Java 8, right?
Yeah, Java.
Okay. Any specific feature you have remembered? What features you have, what features of Java you have used?
Yeah, I used Stream APIs. I used optional class.
Okay.
Yeah, and in my prior project, I also used the datetime API.
Datetime. Okay. So for that, okay. So suppose if I have to get the current time, okay, by using Java date API, okay.
Yes.
How would you get that?
So you can use the local date and dot now. You will get the current date.
That is the old one, Java 8. Anything specific introduced into Java 8 to get the current time? Something which is only available in the Java 8.
Local date and local time means a class is there. So
have you heard about the instant class?
Which class?
INSTINT, instant.
No.
Okay. So suppose if you have a list of employees, okay.
Okay.
So employer has an employee ID, other details, and employer also has an age. Okay. And I have certain objects and list of objects of an employer. If I want to filter the employee whose age is greater than 50, okay.
Okay.
Using Java 8. So how would you filter that?
Age is greater than 50.
So I have to make use of the Java Stream API, and I have to filter. Okay. So I have the list, and out of that list, I have to filter only those employees list whose age is greater than 50.
Okay. So you can use the list of employee list dot stream dot filter e expression e dot get age greater than 15 you can use the find any method, and you can use the collect method to collect the list.
Okay.
Collector dot to list, you can return that list.
Okay. If I have to remove the duplicate element,
Okay.
Okay, from the list, then how would you do that? Same using the stream API.
You can use the list dot stream dot distinct method is there. So you can use that distinct method, and you can collect the use the collect, and in bracket you can use the collector dot to list, and you can return that list.
Okay. So Hibernate also you have used, right?
Yes.
Into your application.
Yes.
Okay. So if I have to make a setup of, I have to make a database connection.
Okay.
What I need to set up? How I would make the database connection into my project? What are the steps needed?
So you want to set up the connection. So for
okay. So you in your REST services, I have to write down the DTS, right? Sorry, DAOs, and then DAOs I have to connect to the database.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are all the things you require to set up this?
Okay. So first you need to write the properties file. So there are the mandatory properties of the Hibernate, like username, password, driver, and dialect, and your driver also. You have to mandatory properties you need to provide to the Hibernate, and apart from that, you have to write the entities of the all the tables. So and you have to provide that entities you have to open the session factory, and you have to open the session, and you can write the queries for that. And for the entities, you have to mention that entities name into the in the configuration file. You have to mention the entities file.
So in the configuration file, what are the things you have mentioned? Like, so I'm just looking for a connection side. Okay, so definitely I need some configuration which like allows me to connect to the database. So maybe one hint I can give you, I have to set up the data source.
Yeah. So yes, you have to provide the username, password, URL, that which database.
But where? Setting up the in which bin I need that.
Which bin?
Means okay. So suppose if
So you have to mention the, like, if you are using the Springboot, you have to create the configuration class, and in the configuration class you have to like in the properties file you have to mention all the properties, and you can use that you can inject that properties into your configuration classes, and yes, you can configure it.
Have you heard about the entity manager factory?
Entity manager factory. Entity. No, actually.
Okay, so have you used the address transitional annotation?
Transaction, yeah.
What it does, yeah.
So the transactional, like suppose you have the transaction, you are working on the transaction. So there are the transactions, propagations level are there. So you have to use that propagation level. So there are the few propagation level, like there is required new, and nested. So that propagation level you have to mention in the transaction and at the transaction annotation. And
So suppose if I am connecting to the two database from the same project, okay. So from my single application, I have requirement to connect to the two database. Okay. Two different databases.
Okay.
How would I do that?
Yeah. So you have to maintain the two separate properties file. So for first database, there are the separate properties like database URL, driver, and name. And for the your second database also, you have to mention the all these things, and you have to write the separate entities file for both the database, and you can open the session factory. So for first database there is a separate session factory, and second database there is separate session factory.
Mm-hmm.
So suppose you want to persist any object into the first database, you can open the session from the first session factory, first database session factory, and you can write a query, and you can persist the data into the first database. So
Okay.
likewise, you have to.
Yeah. Okay. Harshit, do you have anything on this project to ask? Cover this project part. Harshit?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I have a few scenarios to ask. So on the list of employees you were saying, right? So suppose I have a list of employee, and employee object has employee name, employee ID, and firm name. Yeah, I have 10 such objects. It's in a list, and from different firm names, right? And I want to group these employees based on the firm name. So how will you approach that? So there is a old way also, and if you are using Java 8, so there is a new way which is very short. So how you do that?
So I need to. Can you please repeat it? What I need to do?
Sure. So suppose there are 10 employees.
Okay.
Yeah, employee objects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and employee objects have employee name and firm name and employee ID, right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
Suppose E1, E2, E3 employees belong to F1 firm, E4, E5, E6 employees belong to F2 firm,
Okay.
and rest of other 4 employees belong to F3 firm. Yeah.
Okay.
What I want is my output should be F1 E1, F1 E2, F1 E3, F2 E4, F2 E5, F2 E6. So I just want grouping. So I can say that, okay, from F1 I have these many employees, from F2 I have these many employees.
Okay.
You got the question?
Yeah, I got the question.
Okay. Yeah. So how will you group that?
Yeah. So for that, I need to use the employee list dot stream. So and we need to use the collect method, and collectors dot grouping by, and you have to use the employee class who's um, there is an instance of method is there, so you can use the get firm, and you can count the employee like comma collectors dot counting uh, emp, so you will
Mm-hmm.
get the employees
No.
from
So
the
if you do,
platform.
let's say, if you just collect based on the grouping by, you said, right?
Yeah.
So in grouping by, you will, let's say, you will pass the expression for firm name, because on that basis you are
Yes. Yeah.
grouping them.
Mm-hmm.
So what you will get back after grouping by, and if you do collect on that? Will it be a map or it will be a list?
I think it will be map.
Right. Okay. So yeah, map you will have keys as the firm name and the respective values.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. One more thing about your current project. So have you faced any challenges, any obstacles, any blockage in your project, like while developing you may have seen out of memories, or let's say number of threads too high? Have you faced such scenarios ever?
No, I haven't faced.
Okay, so
Yeah. So how are you managing the performance of the APIs? Have you ever come across a scenario where you have the performance issue, and how did you overcome with this issue?
Yeah, so for that, actually we are deploying into the AWS, so the deployment team will take care of that performance side.
No. Performance in the sense I am asking like the working of a API.
Working, okay.
So suppose if I have written the REST API, and if I have to like give the response into certain time, right? Or maybe if the data is too high, like it is not coming up, and there could be multiple scenarios.
Okay.
In the function of a API. So any challenges you have faced during the API development?
Yeah, actually, in our project, we have implemented the two-way SSL. So first thing, like we need to identify the client because we are invoking the third-party APIs. So in that, when we are implementing that, then we are facing the issues like we are not able to we need to import the certificates of the client into the server JDK key store. So actually we are not aware about the process. So yeah, that time we were facing this issue.
Do you understand how this communication happens? Like when you talk about the certificate, okay, what does it mean and what role it will be play
Yeah.
into like in calling the API? Yeah.
Yeah. So there are the two ways communications when the client invokes the service APIs. So we need to identify the client. So for that we need to import the client certificate into the service server JDK key store. So in the server we need to store that certificate, and also we need to import the server certificate into the client JDK key store. So both should be identified. We need to identify the client, and also we need to identify the servers when we are sending the response to the server.
Yeah, but how it will happen on the runtime? Like, so suppose if I had the API with my the JDK which has the certificate, okay, then what would happen next? How the certificate thing will get validated in the background? So if I have to make a HTTPS call, right?
Yeah.
I have to provide the certificate.
Yeah. So I think when you are invoking the HTTP, then the TLS protocol is there. So with the help of TLS protocol, it will be get communicated with each other, and after that the server certificate will validate the client call.
Okay. So do you have any process to create a certificate by your own, or you get it by from somewhere else?
No, middleware team will create that certificate, and they will provide it to us.
Okay. So how is the deployment process of your services? Which deployment process you follow?
Yeah. So
suppose if you have built, okay, you have checked in your code. What happens right after that?
Yeah, after that, code like war file is created, and we are using the Jenkins for the deployment, and we have written the jobs in the Jenkins. So the work file get deployed into the AWS instance.
You only deploy war, or
no? We are not.
So for building your project, okay, what do you use like for building your project? If I have to like trigger a build of my project, okay. So what output you created? Have you heard about the assembly, or have you used the assembly?
No, I haven't.
So suppose if I am building my project, okay.
Okay.
So that's why. What happens after the building? Like, do you store your artifacts somewhere else and you deploy, or?
Yeah, actually, the Git URL is configured into the Jenkins. So yeah, in the Jenkins,
that is for checking out the code.
Yeah.
Okay. So as soon as you trigger your build, if you have the Git
Yeah.
URL, it will check out your code.
Yeah.
It will build your code. And what happens next? Suppose if I am triggering a release build, where do you store your artifact?
Artifact will stored into the Git Bitbucket.
Have you heard about some Sonar?
Yeah, I have heard, but I haven't used.
Okay, and which tool you use for the deployment?
They are using the Jenkins.
Jenkins for building, right?
Building,
Or
yeah.
deployment you must be. But deployment, how you deploy your project into like any environment? Suppose, okay, so I have changed my code. My code is built by Jenkins. Now I have a requirement to deploy it.
Yeah, so there is a DevOps team for it, so they will take care of it. We have only the access of
Okay.
development.
Do you have any exposure how this process works? I know that DevOps separate. You have a separate DevOps team.
Mm, actually, means I
So you
know.
request them to deploy.
Yeah.
You request them to deploy, and they deploy it for you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Anything you are aware? So suppose if you have the service, right? How many servers you have in your current infra for the REST services?
Yeah, we have the like two services for each environment, two server for each environment.
Okay.
So if it is
And
once down, it will move it to the another server.
how do you achieve that? Like if as an end user, I don't know which server to execute, right? Then what do you use in between? I mean, okay, so in the background there would be two servers running, right? And based on the availability, it will pass on my request to any available server. How
Yes.
these things happens in the background, maybe, or maybe I am specifically looking for a load balancer implementation. Do you have any load balancer implemented?
Yeah, but sorry, I'm not aware of it.
Okay, means conceptually, if you ask, okay,
Yeah.
so if I, as a client, okay,
Okay.
I'm a client of your services, okay,
Okay.
so you have given me the URL,
Okay.
okay, you have to use this URL,
Yeah.
okay, but in the background,
Mm-hmm.
you have two servers running, okay,
Yeah.
how this thing happens, like, like my request will go to the which in any of the server, if and one server is down, and then my request will automatically route to the another available server, how this flow works?
I think in the AWS they will redirect that request to the another instance.
Have you heard about the load balancer anytime before?
Yeah, I have heard, but yeah.
Okay, so in your project you are not aware.
Yeah.
That is okay. Okay. Oracle, you worked on the 10G, right?
Yeah.
And how comfortable are you with the querying the Oracle database? Like if you have to query if you have to join to multiple tables and if you have to extract out the data, you're comfortable in doing that,
Yes, I am
or you have
comfortable.
used long back?
No,
Okay.
I have written the queries as well.
Okay, queries. Joins.
Yeah, also worked on the join.
Okay, and PostgreSQL.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked on that in any of your project?
Yes, my first project I worked on the PostgreSQL.
Okay, so in PostgreSQL, okay, if I have a table and which is a of data, which data type I have to select in the Postgres. If I have Oracle, I have a club data, and I have to move that table into PostgreSQL. Okay, so
Okay.
club data will be equivalent to which data type into Postgres?
Where can? Blo-
Worker will be enough because so first question, why would we use CLOP? What is the limit of worker in Oracle?
Oracle limit.
How many maximum character we have in worker?
No, actually, I don't remember.
Okay, if I have to store the complete response into the database, okay?
Okay.
So which data type I will select?
Actually, worker 2 is there. So worker 2 having the maximum size. So you can store the response.
But I am not sure the response would be having how many characters.
Okay.
Okay, Harshit, you have anything to ask?
No, I think I'm done from my side.
Yeah, so I have certain questions more. Sorry. Have you ever used generics?
Generics, yeah, I have.
But why we use a generics?
It's for type safety. So you can it will provide the type safety, and compile time it will show you the error.
And what do you understand by the code reusability?
Code reusability, yeah, you can use the inheritance. So you don't need to, or you can use the oops concept. So
Okay, so let me give you one scenario.
okay.
Okay, so I have the third-party APIs. Okay, I have the multiple APIs. Okay, and which I will be hitting. So I have all the authentication in place. Okay. So, but the thing is that for multiple APIs, I would be having the different response type, different requests. Okay. And so there would be certain point which would be the same. So I have to get the response. Okay. And based on the entity type, so there would be like I have a different entity type. Maybe let's take the product group. I have a context. I have certain different things, right? But the method would be the same, like calling the API certain things. But my request will be different, and response object would be different.
Okay.
If I have to implement in such a way that most of the code should be reusable.
Okay, correct.
Then how can I do it? Because if I write down for every object, right, then it would be the duplicate code.
Correct. So for that, I think you can use the facet design pattern. So facet design pattern, you have to create one interface, and in that interface, you have to use you are invoking the services, and second one you are processing the response. So you can declare that method into the interface, and you can create one class and you can override that interface. So if you are the different clients, you can create the classes for multiple clients, and you can use the same methods. And you can also you can use the factory design pattern. So you can, on the basis of uh, suppose there are the multiple clients, so on the basis of the you can send the client name, so you can create the instance, and you can yeah.
And how generics can help me here?
Yeah, so the generics like you can provide the type inference, so you can provide the uh, you can pass the any type of object.
Okay. No, any type of object. But if I have to use something like if I want to implement the code reusability code, I want to reuse my code. So I have the 10 different entities,
Yeah.
and I have the request. Okay, for all 10 different requests, 10 different entities, I would be having separate requests.
Okay.
Okay. So I have to create request and I have to get the response. Okay. So
Yeah.
my one class is request, another class is response.
Yes.
But it would be different for all the entities. The request would be different definitely, because for each object I have to create different requests. And
Yeah.
response also will be different. Okay.
Okay.
But if I make use of generics, how can I make use that it would be like my most of the things will be reusable? Hmm.
So
Okay. Have you ever implemented generics in your any of the project?
yeah, I have implemented. So we
And
need to, yeah, we need to declare a
yeah.
class, and in the
Hmm.
class we need to use the type inference. So it is a type inference.
Yeah.
So you can declare it, and you can use that into your when you are passing the object. You can pass any type of object when you are using that type inference.
Yeah. So now I'm coming back to my sense. So if I have a request, okay,
Uh-huh.
and it could be of any object, right? The
Yeah.
request type could be any entity. Can I do the generics
Yeah.
here
Yes.
in
Yes.
my scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, have you ever implemented multi-threading?
Yes, I have implemented, but not in this current project. I have implemented in.
Mm-hmm. Are you aware of the executor service?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain me what it is and how we can use it into the concurrency execution?
Yeah. So the executor provides like execute methods which accept the runnable task, and there are
Hmm.
the few executor service like fixed thread pools and single thread pools. So you can create the thread and you can assign the task to that thread. So
Okay.
yeah, so using the callable interface, you can once the thread get completes the executions, you can get that response, and you can use it in your project.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, I'm done from my side. Harshit, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think I'm also done.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks, Amol. Yeah,
yeah,
thanks for your time.
thank
It was
you.
nice talking to you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
me too. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Harshit. Thank you.
Bye.